She wasn't crying when he found her. That was the thing that stopped him. Not the crying, the absence of it. Ethan Walker had been riding the same stretch of Comanche Creek wagon trail for 11 years. And in 11 years, he had heard plenty of crying from plenty of places and kept riding. That was the rule he had made for himself after the fever took Sarah and James in the winter of 1880. Keep moving. Don't look too long at anything that might make you feel something. Because feeling something had a way of costing a man everything, and Ethan Walker had already paid everything once. He had nothing left to spend. His horse, a big gray gelding named Dust, slowed without being asked, somewhere along the flat stretch between the dry creek bed and the old Mission Road. Ethan felt the change in the animal's gait, a hesitation, a lean forward in the ears, and he almost urged the horse on. Almost. Then he heard it. Not crying. Something that had come out the other side of crying and kept going. Something thin as wire, pulled too tight. The sound a voice makes when it has used up everything soft in it, and what's left is just the core, just the part that refuses to stop. He pulled Dust to a stop. Down off the left side of the trail, pressed against the root of a broken mesquite tree, a child sat in the West Texas dirt. She was small, far too small for however old she was, in a dress the color of ash, torn at both shoulders, and one of her legs lay at an angle that made something twist painfully in Ethan's chest before he'd even had time to think about it. She was holding something wrapped in a piece of horse blanket against her chest. That was the thing making the sound, not the girl. The girl was silent, watchful. Her dark eyes tracked him down the embankment the way a person watches something they're not sure about yet. Not with fear exactly, but with the focused attention of someone who has learned that getting a first impression wrong can cost you. She had been sitting there since before noon. Ethan would learn later that 4 wagon trains had passed her on the Comanche Creek trail that afternoon. He counted them afterward in his head. 4 separate groups of people moving west, all of whom had looked at a 9-year-old girl with a ruined leg and a dying infant brother in the September dust of 1881 and kept moving. Some of them, he would learn, had even slowed down. None of them had stopped. If something in this story has already caught in your chest, subscribe and stay until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far a story about one man stopping can travel. Ethan dismounted without deciding to. He walked down the shallow embankment with his hands visible and his movements slow, the way you approach a spooked animal when you want it to understand you're not the threat. The girl watched him come. She didn't run. She physically couldn't run, and he understood that without being told. She didn't scream either. She just watched. He crouched down a few feet away and held himself there. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said back. Up close, her face was the face of a child, still round, still unfinished, but her eyes were something else entirely. dark and still and calibrated in the way of a person who has been reading people for survival long enough that it has become second nature. She looked at him, and she was measuring him, and he felt measured. "That yours?" He nodded at the bundle. "My brother. His name's Samuel." She adjusted him against her chest with a practiced ease that broke something quiet in Ethan's ribcage. "He's hungry. I ain't got nothing to feed him." Ethan looked up the trail. The wagon ruts were fresh. He looked back. "Where's your people?" Something moved across her face. Not pain, something colder than pain. The look of a person who has already done their accounting of a situation and come out the other side of it and doesn't need to do it again. "Gone," she said. "Gone how?" She shifted Samuel against her chest. "My stepfather said me and Samuel was slowing everybody down. Said a girl with a bad leg and a sick baby wasn't worth the water they drank." She paused. "So he stopped the wagon and told me to get out. I got out." "Your mother?" Clara's voice didn't waver. "She cried real hard, but she didn't get out with us." Ethan sat with that. He didn't say anything because there was nothing decent to say, and he had enough respect for this girl not to cover the truth with worthless words. He looked at Samuel. The baby's lips were dry and cracked, his color wrong, too white at the edges. And he looked at Clara's leg, the skin below the knee scraped raw and hot-looking from the dust. "How long you been sitting here?" "Since before noon." She tilted her chin at the sky. "Reckon it's past 4 now." He reached behind him and unhooked his canteen. He held it out. She took it immediately, no hesitation, no pride getting in the way. She unstoppered it, dripped water onto her own finger, and pressed it to Samuel's lips. The baby's mouth moved. She did it again, patient and slow and completely certain in what she was doing, talking to the baby the whole time, in a voice so low Ethan couldn't make out the words. After a minute, she handed the canteen back. "Thank you. I'm Clara. Clara May Bennett." Ethan Walker. She studied him with those old, quiet eyes. "You're going to leave us too, Mr. Walker." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even an accusation. It was a statement, a prediction based on 11 straight data points, 4 of which had happened that afternoon alone. He looked at this 9-year-old girl with her ruined leg and her dying baby brother, and her voice that was perfectly level when it had every right not to be. And he felt something happen in his chest that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not love. Not yet. Something that comes before love. Something that felt like recognition. Like finding a word for a thing you'd been carrying with no name for it. "No," he said. "I ain't leaving you." Clara nodded once, recording a fact. "All right then," she said. "I want to say something here before we go further." In the fall of 1881 in West Texas, child labor indentures were legal under territorial law. A guardian, biological, step, or purchased, could sign away a child's labor for years in exchange for cash payment or debt forgiveness. The courts called it productive placement. Historians who have combed the county records of Palo Pinto, Eastland, and Comanche counties have found hundreds of such filings from the 1870s and 1880s. Most of the children named in those documents never appeared in any subsequent record. Not a school census, not a marriage record, not a grave marker. They simply stopped existing on paper. The cruelest part was not the law itself. It was the silence of every adult in every wagon on the Comanche Creek trail that afternoon who looked at Clara Bennett sitting in the dirt and decided that looking was enough. Ask yourself, and I mean really ask, not the comfortable version, what would you have done? He got his arms under her without making a production of it, lifting her carefully with Samuel still held against her chest, and carried them both up the embankment to where Dust stood waiting. Getting Clara into the saddle required working out. Her leg meant she couldn't sit the standard way, but she didn't complain and she didn't apologize. She adjusted herself until she found the position that worked, settled Samuel against her chest, and said, "I'm good," in a voice that left no room for argument. Ethan took the baby from her long enough to mount behind her, then settled Samuel into the crook of his left arm. The infant was lighter than he expected, disturbingly light. He could feel the small ribs working with each breath, that shallow, effortful rhythm of a body spending its reserves. "He's going to be all right," Clara said. She wasn't asking, she was stating it. The way people state things they have decided to believe because the alternative is not survivable. "We'll see to it," Ethan told her. He turned Dust toward home. The Walker Ranch sat 4 miles outside Red Hollow, set back from the road behind a line of old cottonwoods. It wasn't much. A cabin with a window on the north side that leaked wind when the weather turned, a barn roof that needed patching, a kitchen that had the particular emptiness that comes not from being bare, but from once having been full and then being emptied all at once. He'd stopped seeing it years ago, just a place to sleep and wait for morning. When he helped Clara down from the saddle in the yard, she stood, held herself upright with one hand gripping the stirrup, and looked at the cabin with an expression of such concentrated attention that Ethan found himself looking at it too, trying to see it through strangers' eyes. "It's real solid," Clara said. "It leaks," Ethan told her. "I've slept in worse." She said it easily, like weather. Then, "You got a wife?" "Had one." She heard the "had" and didn't push at it. "Children?" "A boy, James. He was 3. He paused. "Fever. 3 winters back." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker." She said it the way adults say it when they mean it. No flinching, no rushing past it to make herself comfortable, just putting the words down and letting them sit. Inside, the first hour was the hardest. Samuel needed milk, and Ethan didn't keep a milk cow. But his neighbor, Mrs. Pratt, ran 2 goats on 20 acres close enough that he could ride out fast and come back with a jar of warm goat's milk and strict instructions that he had no business raising babies alone. Clara fed Samuel with a cloth dipped in milk, squeezing drops slow and careful into the baby's mouth, talking to him the entire time. Samuel's cry thinned, then stopped. He drank. His color began to even out, the awful white at the edges of his lips fading back toward something that looked like a living child. Ethan built up the fire. He watched from across the room and felt something happening in the house that hadn't happened in 3 years. He was afraid to name it. He was afraid that naming it would make it fragile. Clara looked up and caught him watching. "He likes it when you talk," she said. "Even when he was first born, if you talked, he'd go quiet, like he was listening." She touched Samuel's cheek with one finger. "Our mother used to sing to him." There is a particular kind of silence that forms between two people who have both been broken. Not the empty silence of people with nothing to say, but the full silence of people who have both learned that some things don't survive being spoken too early. The Walker cabin had been full of the first kind of silence for 3 years. That night, for the first time, it held the second kind instead. Later, when Samuel was asleep and the fire had burned down to a steady orange pulse, Ethan cleaned and bound the infection along Clara's ankle and knee. She sat still through all of it, holding the baby, talking to him in that low, continuous murmur, never once letting Ethan see what it cost her. When he was done, she said, "Thank you." Then, "You should sleep." "You should sleep," he said. "I don't sleep much." "Tonight you will." He gave her his bed, the only real bed, the one with Sarah's quilt that he hadn't changed in 3 years because changing it felt like something he wasn't ready to do. He slept in the chair by the fire, with Samuel in his arms, because the baby needed warmth and someone to feel breathing against them. He'd read somewhere that infants needed to feel another heartbeat. Past midnight, Clara's voice came from the bedroom. "Mr. Walker." "Still here," he said. A pause, then, "Why'd you stop on the trail? You could have kept riding." Ethan looked at the fire. Dust stopped. The horse. He heard something. "But you came down anyway." "Yes." Another pause. "Most people don't." He didn't answer, because it was true, and they both knew it was true, and covering the truth with words wouldn't help either of them. "Mr. Walker," her voice was smaller now, "I want you to know I ain't going to be a burden. I can cook, I can mend, I'm real good with numbers. I know how to take up small space." Ethan turned in the chair. She was lying on her side facing him, Samuel tucked against her, watching him with those dark, still eyes. "Clara," he said her name quietly. "Stop talking like that." "Like what?" "Like you got to earn the right to exist somewhere." His voice came out rougher than he meant. He steadied it. "You don't owe me a list of your uses. You're a child. You don't owe anybody that." She stared at him. "Now go to sleep," he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned her face toward the wall. And long after he thought she might not, she slept. Morning came hard and gray, the way West Texas mornings do in late fall. Cold getting into the boards of the cabin, making everything creak and shift. Ethan was already at the stove when Clara appeared in the doorway, upright on her good leg, with one hand on the doorframe. She took in the room the same way she'd taken in the ranch the night before. Careful, complete, recording it. "Coffee," Ethan said. "Yes, please." He poured a cup and set it on the table. She made her way across the room with a movement that was almost graceful in its efficiency. Not the gait she would have had with two good legs, but completely her own, worked out over 9 years of necessity. She sat down and wrapped both hands around the cup. "You were up all night," she said. "Some of it." "You don't have to do that." "Eat." He set a plate of biscuits on the table. She ate 3, one after another, without apology. Ethan felt something ease in him at the sight of it, the pure animal relief of watching someone who had been hungry eat without shame. When she was done, she looked at him across the table. "What happens now?" He told her about Doc Harper, about Judge Alcott, about the legal questions surrounding her stepfather's rights, and whether anyone could still claim guardianship over her and Samuel after what had been done on that trail. Her face changed when he mentioned the law, just slightly, a tightening around the eyes. "What if he has papers?" Her voice was lower now. Vernon was always signing papers. He liked papers. He said papers made things real. "Then we deal with what the papers say." Ethan held her gaze. "But nobody is taking you anywhere without going through me first. You understand that?" She looked at him for a long time. The look of a person measuring the distance between what someone says and what they actually do. She had measured that distance before. It had come up short. "You don't know us," she said. "We could be trouble. We probably are trouble." "Probably," Ethan agreed. "Most people worth anything are." Something shifted in her face. Not opened exactly, but moved. Like a door that had been stuck for a long time, receiving its first real push. "All right, Mr. Walker," she said. "All right. I believe, and I have believed this a long time, through everything I've watched and tried to understand about the way people recover from being discarded, that the most radical thing one human being can do for another is simply to refuse to leave. Not a grand gesture, not a rescue, just staying. Showing up again the next morning, and the one after that. Clara Bennett had never had that, not once in 9 years. And the first time she did, she didn't cry. She ate 3 biscuits and said, "All right." That's what people do when they've been waiting for something long enough that they've stopped knowing how to want it. 3 days in, Ethan started building her something for the leg. Not the proper brace, that would come later, from a physician in San Antonio that Doc Harper knew. Just a rough pine support, friction-fitted and padded with scraps of canvas, that gave her left side something to lean into when the walk across the kitchen became too much. She looked at it for a long moment when he set it against the doorframe. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know I don't." She looked at him, Samuel's fist uncurled against her collar, fingers spreading like a small star. "Okay," Clara said quietly, and then, so softly he almost missed it, "Thank you." It was the first time she'd said it without immediately offering something in return. The first time she'd let the thanks just sit there, unhedged, between them. Ethan turned back to the stove. "Long day ahead," he said. And for the first time in 3 years, when he said those words, they didn't feel like a sentence. In frontier households of the 1880s across West Texas, particularly in Comanche and Palo Pinto counties, a disabled child was statistically more likely to be placed in labor indenture than their able-bodied siblings. County records from the period, examined by historian Cora Dillard in her 1974 study of Texas territorial welfare law, show that children with limb deficiencies were indentured at a rate nearly 3 times higher than other children in similar family circumstances. The law did not distinguish between a child being placed for their protection and a child being sold for someone else's convenience. The paperwork looked identical. Doc Harper's visit confirmed 2 things. Samuel was dehydrated and underweight, but his heart was sound and his lungs were clear. With goat's milk every 2 hours and warmth and time, he would be fine. Clara's leg needed more than cleaning. "There's a man in San Antonio," Doc Harper said quietly to Ethan, while Clara sat with Samuel in the corner, pretending not to listen. "Physician, studied in Boston. He's done work with congenital limb conditions, bracing, corrective supports. I'm not saying it fixes what was done wrong in the womb, but he's helped children walk who didn't think they'd ever walk right." Ethan looked at Clara. She was looking at the wall, her head tilted just slightly in the direction of their voices. "Write down his name," Ethan said. That afternoon, Judge Alcott told him about Silas Boone. The judge's office smelled like tobacco and old paper, and the particular tension that lives in rooms where other people's fates get decided. Alcott was a lean, deliberate man who had dispensed law in West Texas for 23 years. He heard Ethan's story once. Then he opened the bottom drawer of his desk, ran his finger down a column of entries, and went very still. "When did you say you found them?" "Day before yesterday, late afternoon." "Stepfather's name?" "Vernon Bennett, traveling west out of Abilene." Alcott closed the ledger. He set his hands flat on the desk. "A man named Silas Boone filed a contract claim in this office 8 days ago," he said, "for 2 minors under the guardianship of Vernon Bennett, a girl and an infant boy." The room went very quiet. "A labor indenture," Alcott continued, his voice careful and precise. "Legal under territorial law for abandoned or orphaned minors. The papers claim Boone purchased the guardianship rights from Bennett for the purpose of, and I'm quoting, productive employment in service of mining operations in New Mexico territory." Ethan didn't move. "He bought them." "The paperwork says so." "The baby is 3 months old." "The paperwork doesn't specify ages, only names." Alcott looked at him steadily. I want you to understand that I am not telling you this is right. I am telling you this is what the papers say. Those are two different things. Where is Boone now? He arrived in Red Hollow yesterday. Alcott picked up his pen, set it down again. He's been asking around about a missing pair of children. He'll have heard you brought them in by now. How long do I have, legally? 72 hours after locating them, he can compel their return. A pause. Ethan, this isn't the first claim Boone has filed. I've seen his name on documents from 3 other counties. Always the same pattern. Abandoned children, disabled children, children nobody's looking for. He let that sit. Nobody ever came back for those children. Ethan kept his hand on the doorframe. His knuckles were white. I'm coming back, he said quietly. Write that down somewhere. Clara knew something was wrong the second he walked back into Doc Harper's office. She didn't ask. She waited until the doctor had stepped out to the back room, and then she said, How bad is it? He told her about Silas Boone. She went very still. Samuel stirred in his sleep, and she automatically adjusted her hold on him. Her lips pressed together. She looked at a point past Ethan's shoulder. Vernon mentioned him once, she said, back in Abilene. Said he'd met a businessman who was always looking for workers for his operations out west. She swallowed. I was listening from the other side of the door. I didn't understand it then. She looked at Ethan. He sold us. Yes. The color had drained from her face, but she didn't make a sound. She pulled Samuel closer, and her hand spread flat across his back, and Ethan watched her do it, this child steadying her baby brother while the ground fell out from under her, and felt something cold and certain settle in his chest. What happens now? She asked. Now I fight it. Can you? I'm going to... Mr. Walker. Her eyes came to his. I need you to tell me the truth. Not what you think I want to hear. The real truth. He held her gaze. Boone has papers the law recognizes. I have a judge working to challenge them, but it takes time, and Boone knows where you are. A pause. He'll come, he said. When? Soon. Maybe today. Clara looked down at Samuel. Her jaw was tight. When she looked up, her voice was the flattest, most absolute thing Ethan had ever heard come out of a human being. He cannot have Samuel, she said. I don't care what the papers say. He cannot have my brother. He won't. You don't know that. No, Ethan said, but I know I'm standing between you and anyone who tries, and that's going to have to be enough for right now. We all tell ourselves we know what we would do. We imagine ourselves standing in the right place, on the right side, with the right words. But I have come to believe that courage is not a character trait. It is a decision made in a specific moment, under specific pressure, with specific costs attached. Judge Alcott had spent 23 years in that office. He knew Boone's name before Ethan walked through the door. He had done nothing. Sometimes the question isn't whether you know what's right. It's whether you're willing to pay for it. That night, Ethan reached into Clara's pocket for the document she'd been carrying since Abilene. She had pulled it out herself, set it on the table between them, said, in a voice that was perfectly steady, "It's the paper Vernon made me carry. Said it was proof of who I belong to. I can read numbers, but not all the words." He unfolded it, read it once, then again. Clara May Bennett and Samuel James Bennett transferred into the guardianship of Silas Boone in exchange for $40 and the forgiveness of an outstanding debt. $40 and a debt. He folded it back up and looked at Clara. "You've been carrying that since he handed it to you," he said, "since the morning we left Abilene." "Why?" She met his eyes. "Because I thought if I ever found somebody who might help us, I'd need proof that somebody was trying to hurt us." She paused. "I was right." Ethan Walker looked at this 9-year-old girl who had carried her own sale price in her pocket across 200 miles of Texas with a dying baby in her arms, and not once let herself give up. He picked up the paper and tucked it inside his coat. "Get some sleep," he said. "What are you going to do with it?" "Show it to the right people," he said, "and make sure every single wrong person in this county understands exactly what they put their name to." The fire started at 2 a.m. Ethan smelled the smoke before he saw the light through the window. He was out the door with his rifle before he'd finished pulling on his boots. The barn was burning fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that doesn't happen by accident. He got the horses out, beat back what he could with wet burlap. By the time the last of it died, the eastern sky was going gray, and his hands were blistered, and the barn was a ruin. He was standing in the yard, looking at it, when the cabin door opened. Clara came across the yard on the pine support he'd built, moving fast, Samuel bundled against her chest. She looked at the barn. Her face went through several things very quickly and settled on controlled and deliberate. "Boone," she said. "Yes?" "He's sending a message." "He's sent it," Ethan said. He crossed to the front door. The note was nailed to it with a 6-inch spike. "Return the children or lose everything." Clara read it over his arm. She set Samuel down in his crate. She put both hands flat on the table and breathed, careful and deliberate, in and out. Then she looked at Ethan and said something he would never forget. "I'll go," she said. "No, listen to me. If I go, he stops coming after you. Clara, your barn is gone." Her voice broke for exactly 1 second. Then it came back harder. "Your cattle. He'll take your cattle next. Your land. Everything you have left. And it's because of us. Because of me and Samuel. And I am not going to be the reason you lose everything again." Ethan sat down across from her at the level she was at. "You think going with Boone saves us?" he said. "You think those camps let people go? Nobody came back, Clara. Not one child. You walk out that door and you and Samuel disappear into New Mexico, and I never know what happened to you. That's not a trade. That's just a slower way for all three of us to lose." She looked at the floor. "Clara, look at me." She looked up. Her jaw was tight and her eyes were wet, and she was fighting both. "I made you a promise on that trail," he told her. "Nobody's leaving you again. That means I'm not leaving you. And you're not leaving here. Not because of Boone. Not because of any piece of paper he filed in any office in this territory." He paused. "You understand me?" A long silence. "I'm scared," Clara said quietly, like it cost her something. "I know." "Men like Boone, they don't stop. They don't quit. They wait until you're tired, and then they take what they want." "Then we don't get tired," Ethan said, "and we don't wait for him to move first." They came at dusk. Silas Boone and Sheriff Dale Putnam and 4 deputies, riding into the yard with the legal paperwork held out front like a shield. Ethan was already standing in the yard when they arrived. No rifle, just his revolver on his hip and his coat and his boots in the Texas dirt, standing still as a fence post. The sheriff climbed down. He was 45 years old, and he had the look of a man who had made a great many small compromises over a great many years, and was still telling himself each one had been necessary. "Ethan," he said. "Dale." Ethan kept his voice even. "You know why Boone told you you're here. I'm curious whether you know the difference." Putnam held up a document. "I got a court order. Those children are to be remanded to Silas Boone." "That order was filed on falsified documents," Ethan said. "The guardianship was obtained through a paid arrangement with a man who then deliberately abandoned 2 children on a public road. A 9-year-old girl with a disabling injury and an infant under 3 months old." He didn't look away from Putnam. "You want to serve that order, Dale? You want to put your name to all of that?" Putnam hesitated, just for a moment, but Ethan saw it. Boone moved his horse forward. "Sheriff, serve the order." Ethan said, "There are witnesses. Judge Alcott, Doc Harper, Mrs. Eleanor Reed, Jonah Briggs, and a federal circuit judge in Austin who received a wire this afternoon with a copy of the original transfer document." He looked at Boone. $40, Silas. That's what you paid for them. You want me to say that number out loud in this yard?" Something moved fast behind Boone's eyes. A man recalculating. Putnam took a step forward. The deputies moved with him. Ethan did not move. He stood in the dirt in front of his own front door and said, quiet as a man giving directions on a Sunday afternoon, "You'll have to kill me first." Nobody spoke. Then the cabin door opened. Clara came out onto the porch step. She had Samuel in her arms, not hidden, not protected behind her body, but held out slightly, visible, presented. She had gotten herself from the floor to standing using only the door frame and her will, and she stood there on the porch with her ruined leg and her baby brother and her 9-year-old face that had never once, in Ethan's knowing of her, shown anything that could be called surrender. She looked at the sheriff. "My name is Clara May Bennett," she said. Her voice carried across the yard like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm 9 years old. My stepfather took money from this man to leave me and my baby brother on the road to die. I have been bought and sold and left in the dirt. And I want to know," she looked at Putnam, "if you are going to stand in my yard with papers that say I am this man's property. I want to know if you're going to look me in the face while you do it." The yard went absolutely silent. One of the deputies lowered his rifle. Then the gate opened. Doc Harper walked through it. Behind him, Mrs. Reed. Behind them, Jonah Briggs. And then, slowly, in ones and twos, others came. The widow Pratt, the blacksmith's son, families from the northern properties, the young couple who ran the dry goods store. 8 people, then 12, then closer to 20, standing at the edge of Ethan Walker's yard in the dying October light, with their arms at their sides and their faces set. Putnam turned and looked at them. He turned back and looked at Clara on the porch. He turned and looked at Boone. "Dale," Ethan said quietly, "think very carefully about what you do next. 20 witnesses, a federal inquiry in motion, and a 9-year-old girl standing on that porch who is going to remember every face she sees tonight for the rest of her life." Putnam looked at the paper in his hand. He looked at Clara. He folded the court order and put it in his coat. "I'm not serving this tonight," he said. Boone went rigid. "Putnam, get your lawyers. Bring me something cleaner." His voice had changed. Not noble, not transformed, just tired. The voice of a man who had reached the bottom of how much he was willing to do. "I'm done for tonight." Boone stared at him. Then he looked at Ethan, and the calculation behind his eyes worked fast and landed somewhere cold. "This isn't over," he said. "You said that last time," Ethan told him. Boone turned his horse and rode out. The deputies followed. The yard got very quiet. Then Jonah Briggs said from the back of the crowd, "Somebody want to tell me where the coffee is?" And the tension broke, the way tension does when it's been held too long. Not all at once, but in pieces. Someone almost laughing, someone else almost crying. And Clara, still on the porch with Samuel, looked across the yard at Ethan, standing exactly where he'd been all along. "I told you," she said, just loud enough for him to hear. "We weren't going to run." True strength has never been about the number of men you can face down in a yard. I have watched enough people crumble under pressure and enough people hold to know that strength is a decision made before the moment arrives. Made in a kitchen at 2 a.m, made at a table with a bill of transfer and a 9-year-old's eyes on you. made in every small moment that nobody sees. Ethan Walker made his decision on a trail when nobody was watching. What happened in that yard was only the proof of it. Silas Boone was arrested 12 miles west of Red Hollow the following afternoon by 4 federal marshals riding out of Austin with a warrant signed by Judge Calloway, who, it turned out, had been building a case against Boone's operation for 14 months. Mrs. Reed's wire and the bill of transfer she'd included had given him what he needed to move. The corrupt Midland judge was arrested by wire before noon the following day. Sheriff Putnam was not arrested. He cooperated fully, wrote his own letter to the federal circuit, and went back to his office to finish his term doing it clean. It wasn't enough, and he knew it, and he kept going anyway. Ethan lost the barn. He lost 11 head of cattle that had wandered during the fire and couldn't be recovered. He lost 2 months of income and most of his winter stores. He did not lose the ranch. Winter settled in around them hard and white, and the Walker cabin was louder than it had been in 3 years. Louder in the ways that only children make a place loud, which is to say, alive. Samuel had started laughing, real laughing, belly deep and sudden, triggered by Ethan's voice or Clara's hands, or the particular way the afternoon light moved across the ceiling. Clara would call Ethan in from wherever he was, just to hear it. "Do it again," she'd say. He'd make the low, ridiculous rumble he'd discovered purely by accident one evening when he ran out of things to say, and Samuel would dissolve into laughter all over again, arms going wide, feet kicking. "He sounds like a goat," Ethan said one evening. "He sounds like someone who's never been hungry," Clara said, and the way she said it closed the subject gently and permanently. Home isn't a place on a map. I've known people who had beautiful houses they went back to every night and never once felt at home in. And I've known people who found home in a 4-room cabin with a leaking north window and a barn that needed rebuilding. Home is not the structure. Home is the specific combination of people who will still be there in the morning, who will not make you earn the right to exist in the space they occupy. Clara Bennett had gone 9 years without that. Samuel had never had it at all. And Ethan Walker, who thought he had buried the part of himself that knew how to make one, found out he hadn't. In April, Dr. Eli Marsh came from San Antonio and examined Clara's leg with the focused attention of someone genuinely interested in the problem. He spoke to her directly, without going through Ethan, and she answered with the same directness. By the end of the examination, they had developed a mutual respect that looked from the outside like 2 professionals discussing a shared project. "The leg can be braced significantly," Marsh said. "Not corrected, I want to be honest about that. But with the right support and exercises, I believe you can walk without the crutch. With a cane, at most." He looked at Clara. "It will take work. It will hurt sometimes." "I know what hurt feels like," Clara said. "Yes," Marsh said. "I imagine you do." By July, she was walking with a cane. By August, she was riding dust alone for short stretches, the modified saddle doing exactly what Ethan had built it to do. During those rides, she had the expression of someone who had been told for 9 years what she could not do, and had recently, permanently, stopped listening. She started teaching 2 mornings a week, children from the northern properties who couldn't make the ride into Red Hollow for school gathered in the Walker kitchen with borrowed slates, while Clara moved between them with the patient, exacting manner of someone who understood both the material and the cost of not knowing it. Mrs. Reed sent word that she'd never seen a 9-year-old teach, but she'd also never seen a 9-year-old do most of what Clara did, and she was choosing to call it an educational innovation. On a Tuesday in late April, a wagon stopped at the gate. Ethan was working the fence line when he saw it, saw the figure climb down, moving with the stiffness of someone who had been traveling a long time. He didn't recognize her at first. She was younger looking than he'd expected, tired in a way that went past the body and into the bones. She had the look of someone who had rehearsed something many times and wasn't sure any of it would hold up. "Mr. Walker," she said, "my name is Margaret Bennett. I'm Clara's mother." He kept the gate between them. He thought about Clara's voice in the dark on the first night. She cried real hard. But she didn't get out with us. He thought about what it had cost a 9-year-old girl to say that. Without bitterness, just plain, like weather. "Wait here," he said. Inside, Clara was at the table with her schoolwork. Samuel in the crate beside her, one hand resting on its edge. That unconscious connection, always knowing where he was. She looked up and read his face immediately. "What happened?" "Someone at the gate," he said. "I need to tell you who it is before you decide anything." She put her pencil down very slowly. "Your mother." The room went absolutely still. Ethan kept his voice level. "You don't have to see her. I'll send her away right now if that's what you want. You say the word and she's gone." Clara looked at the table. Her jaw worked. She looked at Samuel. Then she looked at the door. "Does she look all right?" she asked. "She looks tired, like someone who's been traveling a long time." Clara pushed back her chair. She picked up her cane, and she walked to the door, and Ethan stepped aside and let her go first. They talked for 2 hours. Ethan stayed inside with Samuel, not listening to the words, just the rhythm. The long silences where something was being accepted. The shorter ones where something was being refused. The one moment when Clara's voice rose briefly and then came back down under her own control. When it was over, Clara came inside, alone. She sat at the table and put her hands flat on the surface and looked at them. "She's going to stay in Red Hollow," she said finally. "She asked if she could, whether I wanted her near." She looked up. "I told her she could stay, but things can't go back. There's nothing to go back to." She understood. A pause. "Samuel will know her. He should know her. She's his mother." Her voice was careful and considered. "But this is his home." She looked at Ethan. "And you're—" She stopped. The room held its breath. "You're what he knows," she said quietly. You're what I know." Ethan sat down across from her. She was looking at the table. Her fingers were spread flat against the surface, the way she braced herself when something required steadiness. "Ethan," she said. He waited. "I've been thinking about something for a while, and I almost said it 12 times, and then I didn't, because I didn't know if it was—" She stopped, tried again. "If I called you Pa," she said, just above a whisper, said at the surface of the table, "would that be all right with you?" The question settled into the room like something that had been looking for exactly that place to land. Ethan felt it go through him. Not painfully, not the way grief goes through you, but the way warmth does when you've been cold so long you've forgotten what warmth feels like, and then you feel it, and your whole body registers the absence of the cold all at once. He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. Clara finally looked up. Her eyes were dry. She had decided to keep them dry, and she had managed it, but only just. "When I lost Sarah and James," Ethan said, his voice coming out rough at the edges, "I was absolutely certain that the part of me that knew how to love people had been buried with them, that it wasn't coming back." He held her gaze. "I was wrong about that." Clara's hands tightened on the table. "I stopped on that trail because dust stopped," he said. "But I came down that embankment because of something else. Something I didn't have a name for." He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "I got one now." She looked at his hand over hers. "Call me whatever fits," he said. "Whatever name fits what this is, because I already know what it is on my end." Clara pressed her lips together. One breath. Two. "Pa," she said. Barely a sound, just the shape of it. And Ethan Walker, who had not cried since the morning he stood in the frozen ground beside 2 small graves and understood that the world does not stop for grief, felt something move through the back of his throat that had no name except human. He pulled her close. She let him. And from the crate in the corner, Samuel laughed. For no reason at all, the way babies do, as if he understood something the rest of them were only just now catching up to. Every time I read your comments, I'm reminded that the people who find their way to these stories are not looking for escape. They're looking for proof. Proof that it's possible to stop when the world tells you to keep writing. Proof that staying means something. If this story reached you, tell me where. Drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to know how far a story about one man stopping can travel. And if you believe even a little bit that the people this world decides to throw away have a way of becoming the entire reason to keep going, then don't leave. The next story is already waiting for you. Some people spend their whole lives on the same road and never stop for anything. And some stop once, for a voice thinner than crying at the edge of a trail, for 2 children pressed against a broken tree at the edge of everything. And in that one stop, find every single thing they never knew they were still looking for. The road doesn't care which kind of person you've been. It only cares about the moment you decide to be different.